The New Yorker, it interviewed our friend and caterer about the increased focus on data in basketball, and Jalen sounded skeptical and concerned. Skeptical about the emphasis on analytics and concerned about the racial disparity between front offices and players who feel underappreciated and boxed out by all these new regimes. So, Bomani, what did you make of our pal Jalen's observation?
Well, this was a story in the New Yorker that I want other people to read so I can see if they noticed what I noticed in that story, which was Jalen making the point that, yes, analytics should be a tool in the box. I think he says it should be a wrench, not the whole box, but says that it is tough for players to have these guys who have not played basketball insist they know more about the game than somebody like Jalen does because they can analyze the numbers. And what you had was a writer who was interviewing him who basically repeatedly made it clear that he thought he was smarter than Jalen Rose when it came to basketball and dismissing what he had to offer under those same circumstances. Bottom line is, the path to being a coach and being an executive for black dudes in the NBA has typically been to be a player. Now what they are trying to tell players is, your knowledge is not good enough because it has to be something that is quantifiable. Well, if that's the path for black guys to get into front offices and get to be coaches, guess what's going to happen? You're going to have nothing but white dudes doing these jobs after a while.
The interview is worth reading. The interviewer, I should note, is a big Houston Rockets fan, and so there was a lot of please don't tell me that the way that my team does it is actually this problematic. But underneath all of that discourse is the realization that the nerds kind of won. The nerds have kind of been the ones stuffing the jocks into the lockers. And I'm not saying that that is something to be proud of.
Oh, based on what?
It is based on the idea that the front office staffing pipeline, for good and for bad, is looking for the quantitative skills you mentioned. It's looking for people who know how to win within this modern context, the modern paradigm, which is, it is not merely enough to have played and to have experience. You're supposed to manipulate spreadsheets. You're supposed to do all of this stuff having to do with information. And I will say, one big red herring in this entire conversation is that we talk about analytics a lot. It's really just information, advanced degrees of information. The problem, though, is in the pipeline. Who is being fed into this? And to me, well, this gets to STEM education. This gets to math and science for young people of color as much as it gets to what happens in the front offices of the NBA.
Did the nerds win or did the white guys win? Did the nerds win or did the rich guys win? And I think that's an important distinction to make because this emphasis that we have on quantitative stuff in basketball, is this about the victory of the nerds or the victory of the hedge fund guys? Because what we've got is a lot of private equity money is now buying these NBA teams. These are the guys that have the money in order to do this. True. They are taking the approaches that they took in the worlds that they lived in and then applying it there to basketball. But guess what else they're probably going to bring with them from the private equity world? The diversity that's in the private equity world, which is virtually non-existent, particularly as it relates to black people. So when we say the nerds kind of won here, kind of, sort of. We've really got one set of nerds that keep on winning, and that's the Warriors. But past that, I think we overestimate just how much the people that are on the farthest reaches of using this quantitative data to put together their basketball teams, just how successful they have actually been. The other thing I always say, and this is important, you mentioned this about STEM education and, you know, the direction that we start in. I don't know if it's easy for a lot of people watching this to relate to like what it is like to be a black person in a math class that is being taught by white people or being, you know, in those spaces. We are consistently and constantly underestimated. The lack of black people in high levels in STEM stuff is not because of our lack of ability. It's because of the lack of interest people have had typically in bringing us into those spaces. The audacity that people would then bring that same attitude to basketball, right? The sheer audacity that you would do that when you come into this world. Oh boy, like I admit, that worries me, and it worries the guys who are around the league, and I don't blame them for that fact because now they got to figure out a way to get on board. And it's hard to get on board with high-level math if you're 38 years old or something like that and never done it before.
It is tremendously clumsy how the power structure as constituted today handles the issues that you mentioned. I go to Sloan every year. Sloan doesn't do a terrific job of advancing a remedy to the problem that you mentioned, the underestimation, the boxing out, the idea that it's conspicuous that we don't have more people of the race of those who make up the vast majority of our game in our front offices. But what's sort of clear, Bo, going back to the winning versus losing, who won this thing, this isn't changing. And I agree, the hedge fund world is deeply troublesome. But it is not changing from that quantitative perspective. And the only remedy is for the power brokers to begin to feed people and encourage them into that path.
I have 2 master's degrees in economics, and the Sloan Conference invited me to be on a panel on activism. Do you have any degrees in like math stuff?
Not only do I have no degrees, I was really bad at math.
What panels they ask you to be on when you go there?
Well, I'm a moderator. I'm not a panelist.
No, but even still, what do they ask you to do?
I have moderated basketball analytics.
Yeah, okay.
Multiple years. I've done all that.
Right, but my point remains. If you ask most people to walk in this room and say, which one of these dudes is good at math, who do you think they're pulling? They're pulling you.
Absolutely.
They're absolutely pulling you.
And that is not something that I'm comfortable with.
Right.
But I am bad at math.
But the point I'm making is, if you want to know how these pipelines get that way, think of that very simple example.